So here's how we're going to conduct the press conference here. I'm going to make some comments. We're going to follow that with questions, which I'm going to have, sorry.
You're okay.
Going to have the acting chief, Anita, up here with me, and we'll pass those questions off to each other as appropriate. Just for your forewarning, the questions, if you ask questions that are specific to the investigation, and by specifics I mean we're not going to be talking about names, we're not going to conclusions, because these investigations are still ongoing. So if you do ask a question that matter, please don't get frustrated with us if I or we say, sorry, we're not going to answer that question. But if the questions are more related to the associated things that are going on, whether it's other agencies, you know, whatever those might be, we'll certainly be glad to answer them, of course, as best as we can. So we'll try to be responsive on that. And okay, let me just then start with the introductions. I'm Wayne Pyle. I'm the city manager of West Valley City. And on my right here, I have Anita Schwimmer. She is the acting chief of the West Valley City Police Department. And on my left, I have Mike Powell, who is formerly our PIO. He is also one of our deputy chiefs right now, and he's fulfilling both those roles while Officer Jason Hauer is gone. So these are the folks that are going to be with me for the purposes of the conference today. So the reason and the purpose that we're here today is we are announcing the conclusion of our internal investigation into the narcotics unit of our police department. We will now be handing off that investigation to the FBI and the DA's office for further investigation and adjudication of the cases. As part of this announcement, we are making comment as to generally the findings of that investigation. And I want to make clear again as we're proceeding that, and I've made this point before and I know others have, but it goes to the question and the purpose of public confidence. These investigations were started and initiated within the West Valley City Police Department. They were begun at the time of the Willard officer-involved shooting. They were found and began as a consequence or an associated matter to them. We called in the outside agencies as was appropriate and according to protocol, and the discussion of the investigation, the results of the investigations that we're seeing today would not have resulted without the participation of both the West Valley City Police Department and the participation and the attention to the concerns of the former police chief. The findings include a number of areas of potential problems, and I'm going to go over those right now for you. And once again, as I mentioned, this is going to be in a general format, not including specifics such as names, numbers, and the reason of course for that is these investigations are ongoing and they will be further considered in the weeks and months to come by other agencies that are involved. Okay, first finding, we find that we may have our internal investigation finds that we may have issues with evidence handling. Our investigation shows that some of our narcotics units, specifically known as the NNU unit or Neighborhood Narcotics Unit, may have technically broken chain of custody by allowing other officers to book their evidence without documentation. Now, having said that, when this happened, items were always sealed and documented, but you may have had basically a technical kind of an issue where a co-worker might have run the evidence bags, the sealed bags, across the street to the evidence locker. Why this becomes an issue is you have to have proper documentation if another officer handles evidence, and we have separate facilities here. As I believe you all know, our public safety building is over there to the right, and our evidence function is fulfilled in this building behind me. We find that investigation is or may be common, and that's a procedural issue that we're going to have to take care of. Another evidentiary issue that we have is we do find that we may have instances of missing drugs and money, among other things, as those evidence issues. And we've audited hundreds of the narcotics unit cases in looking at that, and we find that we're seeing that has happened in a couple of instances. Third issue that I'm going to speak to, we found in our internal investigation is that we may have on a couple of occasions used GPS trackers improperly. Procedural conduct of using GPS trackers includes need procedurally by law and by our own internal policy with a warrant, which in some cases we may not have had. Fourth issue that we've discovered is that we may have internal problems with detectives from the unit improperly taking small amounts of money and property from seized vehicles. Now let me explain what that means. When we seize a vehicle in a case, and after that's been processed and is being disposed of according to seizure laws, the cars are prepped for that disposal. And in that case, you have these cars cleaned out of any items, washed and cleaned out of any items that are in there. We have found that it may be a common problem where improperly taken items out of there, or items taken out of those vehicles were improperly accounted for. That could include things like small amounts of loose change, small personal items, CD, things like that. So from a value standpoint, from an overall cost or importance standpoint, those things that may not seem like a huge deal, but of course if they were improperly accounted for, then that is a serious issue, and we may have a common problem that we're going to have to go back and address and take care of in that. The fifth problem that we are addressing today and noting for you is that internal investigation officers may have improperly collected what we'll call trophies or souvenirs or trinkets from suspects in these narcotics investigations and then kept them. These items would basically be souvenirs of the drug. Obviously, we're calling them souvenirs. Obviously, not souvenirs. They're small items that are commonly associated with the drug trafficking culture. And our officers may have improperly taken those and used them both as training aids and, as I mentioned, a display or trophy kind of a status. And then the sixth and the final issue that I'm going to address is that we may have issues with the improper use of confidential informants. A few of our confidential informants may have been used by the narcotics detectives without following policy regarding confidential informants. And some of these confidential informants may have been illegal immigrants, and we know that's a concern as well, and so we're looking into that. In that particular case, we also find that we had a handful of issues in that area. So that is the basic description of the issues that we found from that internal investigation. As I mentioned, that's not the end of the investigation. It's simply the end of our research and our investigation into finding what those problems are. We're handing that information off to the FBI and the DA's office, as I mentioned. They'll continue those investigations and, of course, conduct the investigations as they see properly and as they find or are looking for other information as well. And that's the end of my prepared comments. I'm going to ask the acting chief. Well, I'm going to take some questions first, and then as appropriate, we'll have the chief come up and stand with me as well. Okay.
We had heard that there was independent auditors that had been hired, two separate independent auditors who had been hired to come in and do the review, or was it an internal? Did you bring in like a couple of lieutenants to do it, or?
Oh,
yeah, conduct it?
What you may be thinking of is when we originally started the investigation, it was solely an internal investigation conducted by the police department. We later also internally brought in our legal team, our prosecutorial representatives from the prosecution team to also do further investigation. We didn't hire any outside consultants for the internal portion of this, that at least that I know of. Is that correct, Steve? Next question.
Is the chief to elaborate on some of these particular findings, or are you in a position to do it?
We're not going to elaborate any more than I already have. If you've got specific questions, we'll decide if they pertain to investigation or if we can answer.
These trophies, describe them.
These could be things like candles, necklaces, little things that, as I mentioned, are associated with the drug trafficking culture.
How much money is missing?
I'm not going to comment on that. That's a specific question of the investigation.
Is there still, now you mentioned that that there was money and drugs that were missing. Were those later found during the audit, or is there still some of that stuff out there?
That's part of the ongoing investigation. We may have missing drugs and money that are associated with those evidence questions still.
Are there any further disciplinary actions against any officers involved as a result of this?
As I mentioned earlier, our investigation or our research into the investigation in terms of gathering data is finished, and we'll be handing that off. But we still do have an internal function as it pertains to adjudication and considering possible discipline or exoneration or whatever the findings are for our officers.
And have anybody, for example, been put at this point on administrative leave or anything like that?
The only officers that we have on administrative leave are the two that have been mentioned previously.
What was the improper use of GPS tracking?
I'm not going to speak to the specifics of that either.
You were talking about it was GPS tracking without proper warrants.
Yes, that's correct.
Is there anyone that's, like, are they in a certain order, one being the worst or the most significant?
That's a good question. No, that's just how I had them lined out as I was preparing the comments.
When you were talking about chain of custody, you said, I thought I heard you say common. They were issued.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Chain of custody that were, did you say common?
Oh, common, yeah. What I said was, it seems that we may have a problem within the department that has occurred on more than one occasion. It's a documentation problem, as I mentioned, and yes, I used the word common.
Can I clarify that?
Yes, please, Chief.
Can I just clarify that? When he says within the department, we're actually just talking about within the neighborhood narcotics unit.
Yep,
Sorry,
that's correct.
not within the department.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. That's correct.
Special investigation is also part of it, right? Did you find any issues there?
When we were originally looking where we were going to investigate and where issues might arise, we did look at the Special Investigations Unit. We didn't find any problems that needed further investigation.
You said this started with the Willard shooting. That's when you started the internal investigation. When you look at it, though, how far back do these problems go?
I don't know. Chief, you want to comment on that?
Some of these problems, as we did our audit, were up to about 2 years ago within this particular unit. So we did try and go back and do an audit to ensure when these problems arose and who might be involved.
I'm sorry, did you say, could you repeat the question, please?
What happened to these specific cases that you found these issues related to?
Well, as you know, District Attorney Gill is looking at all the cases and has been cooperating and working with us closely from the very beginning. He's fully aware of what those cases are, and it's his responsibility to look and continue to decide what the prosecution possibilities are for those cases. So he'll be making that decision, but I do want to note along with that that we're fully confident that he's taken a correct look at those and assessing the viability of them, and we look forward to seeing that.
How long did the investigation take? Internal Affairs investigation?
I'm sorry, how long has it taken?
Right.
Well, this investigation started in November, immediately following the Willard OIS, as I mentioned.
And was it finished when? This week?
It's just now finishing, that's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Chief, were there inklings, was there any inkling of problems within the narcotics unit prior to the internal affairs investigation?
No, there were not. The first inkling, as has been said, was with that investigation, and again, the things that we have found aren't directly related to the Willard investigation. It started with some evidence that was found in the trunk of one of the detectives found that wasn't related to that specific case, the case that they were working that day. That prompted the further internal investigation, and we wanted to be extremely thorough. Some of those things led to other things, and that's why the investigation has taken as long as it has.
How many officers were in the unit?
I don't want to, I believe that there's 6 officers and 2 supervisors.
6 officers and 2 supervisors. And were these findings related to all of the officers and the supervisors, or have you been able to exclude some?
We have been able to exclude some from some of the findings. Some of them, as Mr. Pyle mentioned, were common to the unit, such as having one individual from the unit take sealed evidence from multiple cases over and put them in an evidence locker. However, most of them were only one or two officers that had the issues.
So when you talk about the misuse of confidential informants, the improper use of GPS tracking, the other issues that you mentioned, those were only related to a couple of the officers?
Yes, that is correct.
Are those the two officers who are on leave?
And again, we're not going to mention the names of the officers involved.
And just for clarity, the missing drugs and money, which you've not identified in terms of the quantity, you're not sure if that's still missing, if those items are still missing.
We're not commenting on whether they're still missing or not.
The only other comment we're making there is that that's still under investigation, as we said.
So it's still under investigation.
That's right.
So final determination is not been.
That's correct.
I guess when I hear about missing drugs and money, I have to wonder if it's a matter of cops trying to break the law, or how does that happen?
Well, I don't think I'm going to speculate on that, or that the chief is going to want to do that either. All we're saying is, in this particular case, is we did our investigation and it came to those results. We found that that could be a potential issue, and we're looking at it. We're not speculating as to the whys or wherefores or final conclusion of it.
Do you think if every police department went through and did what you did, do you think that they would find, maybe you can't answer, maybe Chief you know, maybe do you think that they would find the same kinds of issues that you found?
We don't want to speculate on that. We can't say with any assurity what goes on in any other department but our own.
Do you have written protocol for how to handle certain evidence, and how does that stack up against your protocol?
We do have policies and procedures that are in place for the handling of evidence, and this was outside both their training and their policies and procedures of the department.
So that's something super near to be used training in some way. I mean, how would you handle that issue by the
I'll let you use that.
As far as that goes, those types of things are sometimes used to show either the public or other officers what may be clues as to whether people are involved in the drug culture, because there are certain items that are associated specifically with those types of culture, just like there are items associated with the gang culture, and they are used for purposes of recognition training.
Do you have any concerns, Chief, that these findings led over into other areas of the department?
I do not. I think we've done a pretty thorough audit. As we said, we have looked at some other units, and we have not found these issues in those other areas.
And those other units would be?
Again, we talked about the Special Investigations Unit, which they oftentimes help the narcotics unit to add additional personnel to some cases, which is one of the reasons that we looked at them specifically and found that there were not these issues with that unit.
Is it discouraging for you to find so many significant problems?
We are concerned about the issues, of course, and one of the reasons that we did bring these to the attention of the District Attorney's Office and the other entities is because we do believe that they're serious and that they need to be further investigated, and we will certainly be looking at policies and procedures to make sure that this does not happen again.
You say to the public who feel that. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And then that kind of goes to the question there as well. And is it discouraging that we have problems? I'm not sure if that's the right word I would use. Concerning, certainly, and certainly it isn't a happy day for any of us when we discover problems. The confidence that I've expressed before and that I have confidence in today as well, is our process. As I mentioned again, and I know I'm kind of repeating it, I think this is the third or fourth time I've said it just in this setting. I apologize for that, but our processes are what discovered the issue here in the first place. And when we discover problems, we take care of those problems. It's happened in the past, and unfortunately it probably will happen again, humans being humans. But we are confident that we have a great police department. We have almost 200 officers that are out there on the streets each day. These guys and women are handling over 100,000 incidents a year here in West Valley City. That's hundreds on a daily or a weekly basis. They're doing it with professionalism and integrity, and they're concerned for their own reputation as well as the departments in the cities as well. So I have confidence that we're going to take care of these problems as we always do, that we'll proceed forward and make our department and our city better, and that we will have that confidence from the public.
What do you do in terms of trying to discover, I guess, how it got to the point that it got, and trying to stop something like this from happening? And I think it's something that kind of evolved and done over years and years.
I think some of it may be a change in culture and also laws. A perfect example of that is the issue with the trackers. Up until, I believe it was 2011 or even 2012, it was not illegal without a warrant to place a tracker on a vehicle in a public place. That has changed with the laws, and unfortunately sometimes we don't catch up culturally as quickly as we should with those changes.
An attorney for one of the officers who was on leave has said that the problem with West Valley lies in leadership, and that leadership should have been more diligent, should have provided better oversight and better training to these officers. What do you say in response to that?
I'm very confident in the leaders in this department. They do an excellent job on a daily basis managing their personnel. If we do find that there were issues with the particular supervisors or leaders, they will be held to the same standard that we hold everyone else in the department.
Yeah, as we mentioned, the only two officers that are on leave are the two that have been mentioned before.
But more disciplinary action against other officers could be coming.
Consideration of those those proceedings, yes, is continuing on.
You mentioned an improper use of confidential informants. Were any of these individuals put in a situation where they are in danger?
No, that's not the improper use we're talking about. We have policies, procedures about files that are kept on confidential informants and those types of things. That's the improper use that we're talking about.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thanks very much.
Thank you.